When the German forces came in, it was an evil force that shattered our quiet and peaceful life. It's a systematic process of Jewish suffering, degradation, hunger, starvation, and terror gripped our people. A black cloud covered the European continent. It was the greatest eclipse in history. The lights were suddenly extinguished, and the Jewish people entered a long, cruel, terrifying, dark night. Our entire region became annexed back to the Third Reich, back to Nazi Germany. When the soldiers came in, we lived in a high-riser. It's a 4-story building, brand new. And the German soldiers started banging indoors and screaming, "Alle Juden heraus," all the Jews to exit their apartments. And one of the people that lived over there, but the name, you don't remember the name was Volberg. Was a middle-aged man, slow rather, and he was walking a little bit too slow. He wasn't running. They shot him cold. For me, it was the greatest shock to see human blood splattered on the wall and seeing this man was collapsed, laying there and bleeding. The situation became worse and worse with every day. About 2 months later, the Germans ordered that all the Jews must register in order to receive ration cards, because the Germans immediately confiscated everything. And it was very difficult because there was no food. The stores were taken over by the Germans, and everything was Germanized. So the Gestapo put out leaflets that we all have to come to the city hall and the police stations to register in order to receive ration cards. But it was a decoy. They want to have a complete list of the Jewish people that were living in this vicinity. And I found out that it was in all the cities in the vicinity at the same time, received the same order. And I went with my father, mother, and we registered, and we received IDs and some ration cards which had no meaning. And life became very difficult. There was immediately a curfew. But the worst part was August the 12th, 1942, where the Gestapo forced the Judenrat, or in German called Kultusgemeinde, that all the Jews have to come to the stadium, to the police stadium, for second registration. And the family must come to be together, and if the members of the family will be missing, the entire family will be shot. I told my parents, my father, that I heard that it's going to be the same time, the same hour, throughout our vicinity, the state, the same order. And I don't believe that this is the purpose of it. And I don't think I am going to obey the order, and seeing what my father's reaction is going to be. By then already, I was not allowed anymore, because I was already an organizer. I got involved due to my looks, my eye and looks, blonde, blue eyes, speaking speaking German and Polish, I joined, or rather I was drafted into a resistance organization. And also it was a necessity for me, in order for our parents and for my family, my sisters, 3 sisters, to survive with food, because we were not getting any. And by being at the resistance organization, I was able to obtain food illegally. And they're very much concerned what's going to happen this August the 12th on the stadium. And my father responded to me that I should do whatever I think it's proper and not to worry about the family. That will be shot because I was missing. Nevertheless, I was extremely worried. And then around 12 o'clock, they shut the gates on the stadium, and the German Gestapo and the German soldiers walked in, and suddenly it started raining. And the people got soaking wet, and I was very much concerned about especially about my father, what's going to happen to him, since he was so obvious and he looked so Jewish in a Jewish garb, not Jewish, but Orthodox. So I was extremely concerned about him. And at the same time, I couldn't forget that I'm also Jewish, and yet I did not go to the stadium. But when the rain stopped and when it got about dusk time, it started really, some people were coming out from the stadium. And I started running after them, asking questions because I heard shooting. What happened? Who was shot? Why were they shooting? In the beginning, they didn't want to talk to me. So I switched languages from Polish to Yiddish. And then they started talking to me already. But at the same time, I was afraid for the Poles. Outside, they shouldn't hear me speaking Yiddish, and they would assume that I must be Jewish. So I was also very much concerned, and I was right. They kept him over there for 2 days, and then they took him into the city, brought him back to a girls' high school, and back of a railroad track, and there they prepared him and forced them into the wagons. And they took them for a short ride to Auschwitz. But of course, in those days, we didn't know actually what was happening in Auschwitz. This was a death camp. The Judenrat assured us that this is in order to alleviate the overcrowding. So they're going to disperse the people from Sosnowiec in order there should be more room for the people, because it became overcrowded from smaller towns, villages. Unfortunately, my instincts were correct, and we never heard from them again. And about 8,000 Jews, including my parents, at that time perished in Auschwitz. And I became an orphan of myself, not knowing who I am. I had to go on an assumed name, Polish name, and concerned about the Polish people. Some of them were outright against the Jewish people. Some of them were silently against them. Nevertheless, I could not trust them, and it became very difficult for me to survive. But I tried my best to survive as a non-Jew till 1943, when the entire ghetto was liquidated, and some people the Gestapo claimed escaped, especially young people, and to look after them and to search them. And if the Jewish police and the Judenrat will not arrest these people and bring them to the Gestapo, their families would be taken to Auschwitz, for labor. And I lived not too far from there, and I also wanted to find out what was happening to the Jewish people in the ghetto, and what was happening when they liquidated the ghetto. Where to? And it was too close to the ghetto. And after those, I was recognized and apprehended and turned over, to make it short, and I was sent to Auschwitz. When we came into the concentration camp, the first thing, we should lose our identity, our names, and we were tattooed on the left-hand side. And there were two separate sections, the Auschwitz sections, their satellite camps, and when the other one was Buchenwald. So I was tattooed 177-283. They tattooed us to deprive us of our identity, of our names, and as human beings. So it would be easier to murder us since we were just numbers and not people. In Auschwitz, I was a short time. I did not know what was happening till actually I arrived in Auschwitz, when there was a little boy, also about maybe my age or maybe a year younger or older, and I asked him what's happening. Everything smells like burning flesh, and how can one escape from here? Obviously, he must have been a trustee for the Black Elster, and he happened to be a former Polish priest. And he immediately called me to his office, and he told me that, you know what you were asking, what you was talking about? For this, I'm supposed to punish you and turn you over to the Gestapo. And I start crying that I'm afraid. It smells so bad here. And I was a free person. I still did not tell him that I'm Jewish. Still told him my Polish name. And he would know the difference. So he told me, all right, he would forgive me this time, but I should not snoop around, and I should not try to find out or even think of escaping, because there is no escape. However, the only escape there can be is if they will search or they will look for volunteers to be sent to other labor camps. And it's exactly what happened. But a couple of days later, they were calling for volunteers to a labor camp to be resettled. So I volunteered, and from there I was sent, fortunately, to Zeigersdorf, where we were laying railroad tracks. It was hard work, especially for a boy that's only 13 years old. And I still suffer from the same things. My back, my knees, and if the assessment didn't like the way you were pounding the stones underneath, he would grab the hammer and he hit my knees and they stood up and I couldn't walk. Fortunately, that my German foreman was a very decent man, and he took me to the housing where they kept all the equipment, and he looked out in case assessment would come or a guard. So I should stand up and pretend of doing some work. And from there, we had a couple escapees. One was apprehended, and he was shot through the knees, and he was screaming and crying, carrying on. We could hear. And a few days later, we were all transferred to another place, Blechhammer, it was called. And in Blechhammer, we were manufacturing and assembling and making out of coal gasoline. And they started bombing. It was a huge, huge industrial place. And every day we would go there to work. We would leave 8 o'clock and come home 6 o'clock. I immediately raised my hand that I'm a mechanic. And I'm a welder. Whatever they needed, they wanted, I raised my hand, which I've never seen what the welding equipment looks like. But I knew this is the only way I'm going to survive, is by not having any guards over me, no assessment over me or cops. And the Allies were bombing the place constantly. So again, we went on a death march to Gross-Rosen, from Gross-Rosen to Buchenwald, and from Buchenwald to Langenstein, which was digging underground workplaces and assembling planes. And one day, and this was already, as a matter of fact, in April, and this was almost more or less to the end of the war. And we came back from work, and we were ordered to turn around, and we were taking a death march again. And about 2 days later, I felt I cannot continue anymore. I lost my voice because we didn't get any food, no water, and myself and another young fellow about my age from France, we were both talking about trying to escape because otherwise we were not going to make it. And we start planning like cat and mouse. And at night time, we decided we should escape, but in separate directions we should run, not together. And unfortunately, he was killed. He was shot and killed. I survived somehow, hiding every time I was running. It was a forest, 10 feet, 8 feet, and covered myself with a tree, in back of the tree, and survived. And then a couple of days later, I noticed that the Germans were retreating, and also some of the soldiers didn't have any more weapons. And I was extremely exhausted. And I saw an elderly German on a bicycle. So I asked him maybe he could spare a piece of bread for me. So he said he doesn't have it with him, but he has it at home. And I should go with him, and he will give me some bread. And he's in the next village, which he pointed to the village. I went with him, and it was very obvious who I was because I was wearing a striped outfit. And the only thing I was extremely afraid of the Hitler Jugend, because they really believed in the superiority, and they bought into the philosophy. And they were killing people, especially when they saw an escapee. And with this, I was very much afraid, so I was very cautious about it. I didn't believe to take revenge. I believe in justice, but not revenge. And thus I survived, and slowly we started going back towards East Poland to home. Unfortunately, when I came back home, nobody from my family survived, and I was the only one. Since the survivors themselves are passing away, there are very few left. So it's important to pass on this education so people will know the importance of it. Because we see now, even the United States, how anti-Semitism is raising its head. If there's anything we did learn, we must not remain silent. We must all realize that hatred can lead to terrible conclusions. We must never, never underestimate humanity. We must always respect the person, as a human being, and never just another number.